grief is not something we get done doing. It is a lifelong companion, and it is up to us to have and build and nurture a relationship with it. It will wait for you.
Welcome to the Be Well Baby podcast. I'm Dr. Emily Spaeth, founder of Be Well Baby in Portland, Oregon, and the Beyond Birth Blueprint, an online community where we support families through pregnancy, birth, postpartum, and especially life with a baby. This podcast exists because I believe families deserve better than what I am seeing in my work as a physical therapist, lactation consultant, and childbirth educator. Just a quick loving note before we dive in. Everything you hear on this podcast is for educational purposes only. It's not medical advice. Every body and every baby and every season is different, and you deserve support that is personalized to you. Let's get started. I'm so glad you're here. Grief is not a problem to solve. It's not a phase to move through. It's not a box to check or a sign that something has gone wrong. It's a lifelong companion. It's an expression of our love. And learning to live with it rather than outrun it might be one of the most radical acts of self-care there is. In this episode, I'm joined by Alyssa Rose, a grief guide, ritualist, and bodyworker whose work helps build a real, ongoing relationship with grief in all its forms. And we're not just talking about death. We're talking about the grief that comes with becoming a parent, with losing the version of yourself you used to be, the birth that didn't go as planned, the friendships that shifted, the sleep that you'll never get back. Alyssa brings such a grounded and tender perspective to all of it. We talk about grief literacy, the power of ritual, from elaborate ceremonies to just a simple candle. And we go into what it actually looks like to support someone who is grieving and what becomes possible when we stop trying to get to the other side of grief. This one really moved me, and I think it will move you too. Let's get into it. Thank you so much for being here, Alyssa. I'm so happy to see you again.
I know, me too.
Can you share a bit about your path into grief work and what it means to you to be a grief guide and ritualist?
Yeah. It was definitely a windy path. I was not like set out to work with grief. But I was very interested in working with humans and with the body. And my dad's a doctor, but I grew up wanting to be a doctor, but not wanting to follow that education path that I saw him follow. And I was growing up in the Midwest and had no sense of alternative medicine or medicine outside of the Western allopathic kind of way of medicine. So it wasn't until much later in my life, I suppose later 20s, mid to late 20s, that I started to get exposed to those things in Bali and in my travels, and then kind of find my way to Portland, go back to school for massage therapy. I wanted to do massage therapy because I really wanted to do hospice massage. I really wanted to work with people at the end of life. And so I was volunteering with a hospice in Portland. I was also volunteering with medical aid in dying here in Portland. And then I was in school for bodywork and massage therapy. So I could apply that with hospice.
And you said you were in Bali. So how much time did you spend in Bali?
I was there for about 3 months. And that was my first exposure to craniosacral therapy, along with other therapies. But that was so potent that I actually started with, when I came back, I started with Reiki and craniosacral therapy and then massage therapy. And
Can you describe craniosacral for people who don't know what it is?
Yeah, for me, it can be a challenging one to describe. It is because it can be so powerful, but the hands-on experience can feel very subtle. But my understanding of craniosacral is that we're really working with this system that surrounds the brain and the spinal cord, and that cerebral spinal fluid flows through, and that in this system and in the nervous system in general, there's like there's traumas that happen in that space, and there's also adhesions and things that prevent this natural pulse and flow to happen through our whole body. It's another pulse of the body, but it can come out of balance for a lot of different reasons. And so the craniosacral therapy is one way to really support this really deep system that impacts everything but can be hard to access because our bodies really protect that system. So as a massage therapist, if I go in to do muscular work, there's no way I'm going to be able to work on the cranial system because the muscles are protecting around it. So it can feel, it skews towards energy work. It's in between energy work and body work in my lens. I'm curious for you how you might define
Sure.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's such a great question. I was thinking I should probably define it from my perspective as well
Yeah.
because I'm coming to it from a physical therapy perspective and I started out as a massage therapist. So, and I started before that as a yoga teacher. So I have this Eastern Western kind of blending. And I I will tell you how I describe it to families because I don't typically talk about cerebrospinal fluid with families because they don't care. Their baby needs help and I'm there to basically help their baby's nervous system be regulated. And what it looks like is very gentle, hands-on in different places and very subtle movements. And sometimes it looks like me just holding an ear. And so I'll have the parent hold one of their ears and then very, very, very gently pull backwards on it and notice what happens in their face and try to take a deep breath and see if they can like feel any sense of release with those micromillimeters of movement. But the idea is because craniosacral is a branch of osteopathic medicine, every structure in the body is supposed to move and glide over every other structure in the body beautifully. And a lot of times it doesn't. And just getting in there and forcing it doesn't always work, especially for babies, but
Absolutely.
also, especially when you're dealing with something emotional like grief that is not necessarily in the physical body.
Yes. Well, and I'm reminded that I saw you at the infant craniosacral clinics in Portland because I was bringing my daughter in for that when she was
Yeah.
pre-crawling. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the
So,
craniosacral and Reiki and body work all at the bedside in hospice led to a really close view of grief. Both, so this was happening professionally, but it was also happening personally, being alongside my grandmother and someone dear to me, his grandmother at the time in their end of life journeys. And I
mm,
was just witnessing the experience of these two women who were both in the stage of dying, but they were having really different experiences. And that was both
wow,
because of them, but it was really deeply impacted by their support team. And so it became
interesting.
really clear, like how we handle grief impacts our loved ones and it impacts the person going through the big thing that's needing support, like their ability to feel in connection and cared for and able to be honest and true about what's happening for them versus when the support team might be more adverse and scared about what's happening, it can also kind of close down and prevent a free flow and a deep, authentic kind of relationship through these really hard times.
Totally. How do you describe being a ritualist?
Yeah, for me, ritual is such like I want people to feel inspired and empowered to bring ritual into their lives, myself included. And I did not grow up with very much ritual in my life. To me, it came through the form of tradition, like holiday traditions, family traditions that I now can reflect on and be like, oh, there's like this was the bones of ritual for me. But ritual can provide lots of different kinds of support in our lives. It can be a way to carve out time that is like, hey, this time is time that is separate from my dailiness, my daily routineness, and I'm coming into a space of seeking support or guidance or connection with the beyond human world. It might also be a place to say, I'm creating ritual because something in my life is changing for good and I want to mark this change that it will never be the same. and I want to close this chapter of my life and open this chapter with intention and with integration, like bringing forward some key things. But ritual can be like for this reason, ritual can be so potent, especially in becoming parents. And also in all of these small and big medical experiences we have where we might be told by the doctors or the medical team that something's happening or something in our body is going to change or we're having a certain procedure. But can we use ritual in our own lives to mark that and to make meaning out of it and to create something potent for us alongside of everything that might be happening, more in the medical system too.
Yeah. I think about when we have a tradition, I guess, in our family that I've just decided we're going to do, which is what you can do as a parent. When our kids turn 7, that's a big birthday every 7 years. So
Yeah.
7, 14, 21. And for my daughter's 7th birthday, she got her ears pierced. And it was a really big deal for her. And we wrote things on pieces of paper and we burned them. And she thought that was great. Setting something on fire felt scary and also fun. But just like having that moment with her, I don't think she'll ever forget it. And if we had just been like, okay, time to go get your ears pierced, it would have taken away from the ritual of the big deal that it is to now have a hole in your body forever.
Totally. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and ritual it can be spontaneous, it can be small, or it can be much bigger and more elaborate. And so, yeah, I love thinking about it and hearing about different things others have done. I just started a ritual this year with my daughter and with the community where I live on Thanksgiving after the meal. We made a tablecloth. And after the meal, we all embroidered our names into it with one colored string and the year. And so now every year we'll embroider our names and you'll see literally who sat next to who and who was at the table when. And it was, a client shared that with me that they'd been doing it for 20 years. And then you have this tablecloth with all these names and years. I'm really excited about that new one for us
That is
too.
so cool. Wow. So we've gone off on a tangent to ritual, which we will come back to, but I want to come back to grief literacy. And I'm curious what you want people to know about that they might not have learned before, because we don't really talk about grief.
And for me, some of the big things with grief and grief literacy come down to grief is so much bigger than death related. There is absolutely grief with death. And I really believe that there's grief with all loss, all separation, and all change. Like even the good change, even when we become parents and we're so excited and it's healthy and everybody's thriving, there's still also grief. And for me, as a body worker and trauma-informed guide and coach as well, is like, I really see untended grief playing out in our bodies, in our relationships, in our lives in a really similar way as unhealed trauma. And so it's really common that people are coming in with addiction or anxiety and depression and all these other things. And I'm so curious, like, is there untended grief? And where might that look? Where might that be hiding? Or where might that be wearing a different name or a different mask or a different set of clothing, if you will? And so for me, yeah, grief is so much bigger than death. It includes grief with all change, even good change. And
Yeah,
it's
can you give some just like tangible examples of non-death losses or change that might lead to a feeling of grief that people might not have identified?
Yeah, absolutely. There's grief in our relationships changing form, of course, with breakups, but even just form changes of like moving in together or moving out or take like a partner being gone for 6 months, traveling or whatever it might be, right? There's change in the form of connection. Same with friendships, same with animals and family members. So definitely like relationship based grief. There's grief with There's political grief, there's economic grief, there's cultural grief, grief around the loss of culture and language, grief around the loss, just the climate and ecological grief is so big, grief around the loss of human rights. And we have exposure right now to what's happening in the world more than we ever have. And so, like, there's the sorrows of the world, there's grief way beyond what we can control and what we can even support. So
And
that's,
I think beyond what we can process as
yeah,
individual human beings. There's, such trauma in so many parts of the world that we're just living our lives, and some of us don't even look. Some of us look and are like, "Oh my God, what do I do?"
yeah,
Nothing,
yeah,
and it can just be, that can be very overwhelming, and I don't think people name it as grief.
yeah. I agree. Well, and then that brings me to the main category for me. I mean, there's also ancestral grief. There's grief around the harm I've caused, like when I have said something or not said something or caused harm, right? But the place of grief, the gate of grief, which is language from Francis Weller, is that I actually am working the most with, is around what we expected and did not receive, which is so big in our lives across the board, but especially also with becoming parents. And there's so much maybe energy or pressure around, like, if I get my dream job, then I'm going to feel like this. If I find my partner and get married, it's going to feel like this. When I become a parent, it's going to be like this, right? And they can be visible and also invisible expectations. And so there's definitely grief around what we expected and did not receive.
Oh, and I think that can be true on a moment to moment basis.
Yes. Yes.
I think there's grief in parenthood in such a surprising way.
Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about the types of grief that you typically see new parents carrying. And I know you work with very specific groups of people,
Yeah.
but I think that there's a wide definition of grief here.
Yes, absolutely. And when it comes into parenting, usually pregnancy and labor didn't go exactly as we planned. There's always surprises in that, right?
I think the birth
Yeah.
is always an expectation that was
Yes.
not met.
Absolutely. And so slowing down and giving ourselves some time to come back to processing the birth story and thinking about how we tell that story. Like, it's really important how we tell our stories and how that changes over time. And so reflecting is a really, really important piece of continuing to process grief. But as it relates to becoming parents, there can be a lot of grief around the changes of identity, the changes in our bodies, the changes of what nighttime looks like and feels like, what our sleep now looks like and feels like, who our social group is. We can be so in love with our baby, right? And also feel so much grief or sadness or rage or whatever it might be as well. And that can be confusing because we're supposed to just be happy. Like, there's so much pressure to be happy and how lucky we are and all of those things, which are also true. But
Right.
we often don't hold as much space or hold space as well for the complex range of other emotions.
Sure.
Yeah.
There's this messaging of, well, you have a healthy baby.
Yes.
And I find that a lot when I work with families who've been in the NICU, that they're traumatized by the birth. They're traumatized by being separated from their baby. And now that their baby is stable and healthy, everyone's like, well, great, you have a stable, healthy baby. And they're like, but I'm grieving the idea that I was going to bring a baby home to my nursery that was beautifully decorated for this baby. And now they've been in the hospital for 3 months. It can be wild. But I think to your point, it can be just as simple as grieving the person that you were before you were a parent.
Absolutely. Definitely. It's so it's so big, the topic of grief in this area. And I think there's also this shift where like we need support in a different way when we have a new baby at home. And so we need to both ask for support, be able to receive support, be able to be okay, like needing support in a way that is kind of looked down upon in our culture of individual, like rugged individualism. And so like that can feel really humbling and really challenging, especially for people who are like used to being able to do it all themselves and want to do it all themselves and want to be right back out walking and running and like living their life with a baby on board, but in this kind of strong way, or to like show strength in this way. And it can be really hard to slow down and to let ourselves be soft and let ourselves be air quotes, unproductive, but be really present with our baby and ourselves through this postpartum time, and let the ideas and the beliefs and the value connected to productivity in one form of it kind of soften or get quieter as we tend to this new life and this new person that we now are and this new family unit that we now are.
Yeah.
I just wanted to pop in here and say that if the Be Well Baby podcast has helped you in any way, if our team has helped you in any way, the people who find us because they heard about us from a friend, because they heard about us from a midwife or a doula or their pediatrician or their OB. And we value those connections so much. And we know that the only way for people to find excellent healthcare is for people to talk about it. So if you have a minute, please leave the podcast a review. It will help people find this podcast. If we band together and shout this from the rooftops, then we will be able to change healthcare. Thanks.
What about the person who is, loves their baby so much, but is also holding, maybe they're the first person in their friend group to have a baby. This is really common. And they are holding so much grief for just being able to go have brunch with their girlfriends and, have a day or just be able to be called by someone and go do a thing, the impulsivity and that they're grieving the past version of them. What would you want them to hear?
This is so valid and normal. It's so normal to have grief around this. It is so healthy to feel and let yourself fully feel grief around what might feel small, but isn't small. These quote unquote small moments are significant, and they mean a lot, and they say a lot about us and about our identities and about how we have lived. And so really remembering, like, you can have both experiences and they don't take away from the other. You can love your baby so much and also be longing for or grieving or missing things that you no longer have access to.
Autonomy.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me too, I remember in becoming a mother, feeling for my friend, the first friend in our group who had kids, and being like, I was not there for her. I had no idea how to be there for her. I had no idea what she was going through, and my own grief of not showing up to her now that I know a little bit more about what that experience is like. So yeah, there's so many flavors of grief, and I think it's so important to make spaces for us to feel it and to honor it and to know it not as a negative thing and not as something that's taking away from us, but as an expression of love, as an expression of our longing.
I mean, you're right. Our culture looks at grief as something that we have to get to the other side of, right? So what have you seen become possible when we stop trying to complete grief?
Yeah, thank you. It's such a good question. I would just argue, to your point, grief is not something we get done doing. It is a lifelong companion, and it is up to us to have and build and nurture a relationship with it. It will wait for you. Our grief, your grief will wait for you. And And we can be building relationship with it over time. And that doesn't mean that you're going to live in the future without grief. We're going to experience grief for our whole lives, big and small in many different flavors, but it's more about how do I resource myself so that I can feel fully, and like be curious about what's underneath this grief and what this grief is about. I almost feel like it's our responsibility to let ourselves feel the depth of our heartbreak before jumping to action, before like, I need to do something or run or work harder, just like let ourselves feel our heartbreak. And then from that space and that soft space and like let clarity come from there of what's most important to us is some of what I think about about grief and tending our grief in an ongoing way.
What is it? What does it actually look like to be with someone in a productive way who's grieving?
I'm so glad you're asking. So many people have been hurt when they were grieving because the people around them didn't know how to show up and didn't know how to be there. So it's really common that people are like, everybody left because it was too big or too scary or whatever, or they said these things that felt really bad for
Like,
me.
oh, it's okay. Even saying something like, "Oh, but you have a healthy baby," can be the absolute wrong thing to say to someone
Yes,
who does love their wonderfully healthy baby, you know?
absolutely.
So, I mean, partners, friends,
Yes.
sisters, I feel like there's just parents are are kind of at a loss because we don't have in our culture any celebration of grief. We don't have any way to process it except for with you, you know. Um, but even professionals can really really mess this up.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
for someone who is in grief, what is the most helpful thing to do first?
Yeah, so for those supporting a grieving person, um, I want to just say that presence is so big. And it's okay if if you say to your grieving friend or your grieving person, I don't know what to say. I'm afraid to say anything. I'm afraid that I might make it worse, but I am here for you. I want to be with you. I can come over and just be quiet with you. I can be here and you can just share stories with me or share things with me. And I can just listen. But presence, number one, if you are the griever, and this is for all of us, just even thinking like into the future when I'm grieving, it's actually really helpful to consider making a container. I love containers. I'm obsessed with containers. But when I say container, I mean like a space, a physical space of time and agreements, shared agreements and consent. So what that might look like is, hey, Emily, I'm grieving and I call you up and I say, hey, do you have 30 minutes where you can just listen to me and not say anything? I just want you to listen to me so I can share about my grief and have it be held by us together. Like, are you available for that? And I hear over and over that when the griever asks for really explicit guidelines or structure, that it can feel like such a gift to their support people. And as a griever, it can feel like, ooh, I'm asking a lot. It feels bad to
Sure.
ask. But
Yeah.
to the people who love you and want to help and want to be there for you, it can feel like such a gift. So just thinking about containers like that, thinking about ways to honor the grief and the loss. So I work a lot with people on remembrance rituals, which is like, how do I remember what the example is with someone who died, what this person or being loved, like the walks they would take, the way they engaged in the world. Are there ways that I can engage in the world that way or enjoy a meal that they used to enjoy and let my life be continue to be enriched by them and enjoy this sensual experience for them or with them or on behalf of them. And that goes for these other kinds of grief as well. But this, in this case, speaking to like a physical death is one way, these remembrance rituals of celebration.
Yeah. I'm thinking about a client of mine whose baby passed, and the I would imagine, I don't know, but I would imagine that the remembrance would be so painful.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's really true. And I think that's absolutely going to be true for a long time. And that pain is going to take up a lot of space for a while. Yeah. Yeah. I know. Yeah. I
Yeah,
know.
and it's hard to, it's so, it's so hard to know, um, because even, I think even people who you don't know very well who pass, like it affects all of us. And I think we're all allowed to have grief, And I do a thing where I go back and look at pictures
Yeah.
and do like my own little remembrance to honor him. Because he was amazing, in
Yeah.
his short little life.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And also a piece that feels important in this experience of grief is something I learned about in hospice is this like model of these concentric circles.
mhm,
So the person in the middle is the person who's experiencing is closest to this loss. And then there's a next circle supporting that person, and then a next person supporting those people. And it's super important that the energy and the grief and the pain moves outward, from the inside to the next circle, and that the next circle can lean out and be supported outward. And so that we aren't bringing our grief into the closest person. That's really complicated
mhm.
in family dynamics where there's many people so close and we all grieve so differently. So it's
Yes.
not always possible, but I'm always thinking about that flow and
Yeah.
movement.
Yeah. Like that as a peripheral person to a loss, you're not necessarily sharing your grief with the person who's closest to the loss.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah.
yeah, and also again, the role of ritual. Yeah, I also had a client whose baby died, and we did a really we did a closing of the bones and grief ritual kind of combined, and it's like it's so complex, right?
Yeah.
Becoming a mother and also losing a baby at the same time, and like it is complex. It's normal for it to be super confusing and complex.
Yeah. Yeah. If your baby ever needs a pacifier, and not all babies do, the one that I would want in your world is the Ninny. It's the only pacifier designed to actually mimic the shape and function of the breast. It looks like this. It's very soft here, like an areola, and then harder, like a nipple. And this shape means that it supports healthy oral development instead of interfering with it. I really love it because babies don't just passively hold it in their mouth like the ones with a bulb on the end. They have to actively suck. It's hard work. It's my workout pacifier. And that matters for feeding, for regulation, and for long-term oral function. It's especially beautiful for breastfed babies who need a little extra soothing without confusion. If you're listening and you're pregnant, postpartum, or buying for someone you love, you can grab a Ninny through the link in the show notes or use the code BeWellBaby for 10% off at checkout. For people listening who don't know what a closing of the bones is, do you want to just briefly describe it? Because I think everyone who's postpartum might benefit from it.
Yeah, closing of the bones ritual is a really beautiful, ritual or ceremony. Often there's some community that gathers around the new mom or the new parent who's given birth, and then the new parent is laying down, and the body is wrapped. The body is kept really warm, so often there's like a really warm bath that happens first with herbs, and prayers and candles and whatever it might be, and then the body is made really warm, and then wrapped with multiple long tapestries or rebozos, and so that is really helping to bring the whole body back closing of the bones, right after the body has opened so significantly to bring life through. And though it was most commonly done kind of earlier, like within that first year, it's something that women and parents can do throughout the, any time after a birth.
Anytime. You're postpartum forever.
Yes, postpartum forever. And Emily, I would be curious if you have more to add about closing of the bones.
I I have to tell you a secret. I want to do a closing of the bones.
Oh my
but I've
God.
never done one for myself
Oh my gosh,
because I'm
amazing.
really good at telling other people what to do.
Yes. Yes. I don't know anything about that. Oh my gosh. Okay, amazing. Well, we should chat.
We will chat. Yeah. And it was on the list. In fact, it may have even been on the calendar, but it's so hard postpartum to get yourself to do something for yourself. And I find that it almost requires other people to be like, are you doing this? Have you done this yet? Are you planning to do this? So you can also, as a pregnant person, if it's something you're interested in looking into, and even if going to get your own body work postpartum is something that you're hoping for, those sorts of things are so important. And having a plan for when
Yeah.
that's going to start postpartum is, it can make a world of difference in you actually doing it.
Absolutely. And as far as closing of the bones go, that as well, I think about the meal trains. Closing of the bones, if you have, 5 or 10 people who can, put in some money towards having this ritual, towards having this ceremony, or can commit to a time, early on that we're looking far out and help support this really happening, to your point, that can be so supportive.
Yeah. Like if you invite people and they know it's going to happen, it's probably going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we've touched on ritual. We talked about it at the beginning, but I want to really dive in because I think we lack ritual in our culture, and I'd love for you to kind of explain what ritual means. What is a ritual? And then maybe give some examples.
Yeah. And I want to say, like, me sharing about ritual is just that, right? It will be one angle of it, but there are so many like versions and experiences of ritual. So for me, when I do ritual, I have a opening and a closing. I am marking the time and space that this is a ritual space. Often that also includes like cleansing beforehand. So that just might be a shower, or it might be smudging if that's a part of your practice, or it might be an energetic clearing, something like that. Like I am moving into ritual space. For me, often there's an intention. And I'll give an example. Like I planted my daughter's placenta and planted a rose bush, right? And so I had an intention. Like I really want her to know and experience belonging, connected to a physical place, connected to this earth, and to feel home here. And so with that intention, much more can surface and take form. Like a song came in as like, this is the song. And like certain prayers came in, certain plants came in of like, of allies and relationship building and like holding this space for this ritual. And again, having an intention can be really supportive. That was one example of ritual, but there's other rituals where I might be seeking guidance or clarity. I might feel confused in my heart and not know what direction to go. And so maybe it's more of a personal ritual where I'm going to go into nature. I'm going to just take 1 hour and I'm going to go into nature, and there's an opening and closing of like, whether it's, like a cleansing. Often I will light a candle, or I will share a poem, or I will do a grounding or a meditation as a way of opening and arriving. And then there's some amount of asking and listening. That can be to ourselves, that can be to a spirit, if that's part of our practice, that could be to nature, that could be whatever it might be. So there's some amount of like, is there a question? Is there something we're seeking? Is there support that I'm looking for? Guidance, clarity, a lot of different things, right? And then a time of listening. Sometimes I hear nothing. Sometimes I don't get any answers. You're not always going to, right?
Yeah.
But the more we practice ritual, the more, I feel like the more sensitive we become and the more attuned we become. And also I believe the more, maybe trustworthy the side that we're listening for grows of us. Like we're building a relationship so that whoever is on the other side, if it is a if it's nature, whatever that might be for us,
Whatever it means to you.
yeah, starts to be like, oh, this person is here regularly, is reaching out regularly, is committed, is creating a safe place for me to come. Um, and so again, that could be an ancestor, that could be someone that we've loved and who has died, whatever it might be, but it can also be less spiritual than that.
I did something that I'll share, which was, I didn't really even think of it until now when you were describing some of those rituals, that it was a ritual. And one of my friends lit a candle, and that was, to mark the beginning. And she had us take 2 pens in different colors. And the first pen, you wrote down your question, whatever it was. And in the second pen, you wrote the answer from the perspective of the highest version of yourself, the very, very best you that there is. And it was really powerful. And it was a little bit, at first I was like, I don't talk to her often.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
But I could absolutely see how if I did, she would, have more to say.
Yeah. I'm so
And
glad
then we blew the candle out together to mark the ending. And it was so sweet and lovely. And I really used to personally feel like prayer and things like that were not for me. They're for somebody who's very religious. And I think becoming a parent has just opened me up to, my friend had a baby yesterday, and my 2-year-old didn't know that. But today, having not seen this person in months, was talking about her and her baby. And I was like, there's just more than we can understand out there in the universe.
Absolutely. And you're absolutely right also of like, this isn't a religious practice.
Yeah.
For me, there's a lot of ritual that happens around the seasons changing. I actually do a year-long seasonal ceremony container. We're about 20 this year. And so just like, how do we honor the change of the season? Like we do a big solstice ceremony of just like, taking the maypole and burning it into Yule logs for all of the stoves, wood fire stoves on the land. And then burning the Yule log is its own ritual before Imbolc. And, so there's so many different ways to just mark change and mark time passing and mark us changing as well as the natural world changing. And it definitely does not have to be religious or connected to believing in a god or a spirit or anything like that.
Yeah. Time passes for all of us.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and actually this last year, my daughter and I were in Oaxaca for Dia de los Muertos, which is something I've wanted to attend and be a part of for so many years. And that was so rich to witness this ongoing relationship with the dead and this celebration and this time where the veils are thought to be thin and that our beloved dead are here walking with us, and the amount of like beauty and flavor and celebration that happens leading up to it and on those days is so incredible to witness. And so just bringing small pieces of this into our lives in ways that feel authentic and true for us. Back at our own lineage, looking back at our own ancestry, being curious about it, and taking even small steps towards like bringing a little bit of intention to things we might kind of do regularly.
Yeah. Can you think of any other examples to leave people with who are wondering, how do I support this individual and the collective grief, in parenting, in life, in the world. And specifically, if people are listening who are either pregnant or postpartum, they have this incredible opportunity to kind of build in ritual and conversations about grief with their children and just change it for the next generation.
Absolutely.
So what are some like tangible things that you would tell parents about how to hold ritual and hold grief as, you know, their babies are becoming children?
Yeah. I think kids are so natural, such natural grievers and natural feelers, and we have so much to learn from them. And
Yeah.
yeah, and so I think as grown-ups, as parents, like the more we can show them, I'm quoting again, kind of like healthy grief or like expressions of emotion that might be big expressions, but that we can help them feel safe in and through. The more we can normalize like their big emotions, with like emotions really have to move. They have to move through us. It only becomes toxic when they are held and stuck inside of us, right? And so kids are maybe more natural. They haven't learned not to do that yet. And so supporting them by letting them witness us in our big emotions in a way that they can feel, you know, steady and safe and secure in, is one really big way. I also think supporting ourselves and them to turn towards nature as an ally and a friend and something that can really hold our big emotions, like screaming into the ground or a hole, right? Or like stomping our feet on the ground or yelling into the trees. Like there's so much that we can turn to with nature. Same with being at the ocean is such a great place to bring our big emotion. So yeah, turning towards nature. I would also say turning towards creative expression. Like as adults, maybe we are more used to talking about and analyzing some of the big emotions, but creative expression is such a rich way to also create and express and move these energies and these emotions.
It's such a great idea. I mean, kids want to draw.
Yeah.
And what's wild is that sometimes you give them a pencil and they draw the most amazing things. And they have so many descriptors for you of what's going on in their picture. And a lot of the times it is them processing things that they've learned or are not understanding in their social experiences. It's really remarkable. And if we can give space and encourage that, I think it can be really amazing.
Yes, I agree so much. Yeah, the last of that nature, the creative, and the other piece is the social holding, like the social web, the social, the community that holds us. That's needed, I feel, to grieve. Like we need each other. And so again, getting to be in community as parents and with our kids feels like a really important thing for us to have a different future for them. Adiona came with me, my daughter came with me to many grief rituals, and I'm still trying to organize what does that look like for kids to be involved now that she's 2, for like toddlers and slightly older kids to be involved in a way, again, that can feel safe and secure for them, but also brings in this big expression of emotion, and for them to witness adults doing this in a way that feels healthy or is ultimately healthy. Feels like a really big passion of mine, and I don't know the answers of how that looks. And I am inviting all creative, creative ideas towards making that happen.
How does she respond to being at those rituals? Did you have her at the whaling ceremony?
Not this last one, but when she was 7 weeks old when she came to the first one, so she was in a carrier, and as soon as like they're screaming and raging and yelling, and she just slept on my chest, and then she would, when there was a really loud sound, she would like look up and look around, feel me and see me, and be like, "Oh, okay, we're safe," and go back to sleeping for hours of drumming and grieving.
Wow.
And she's come, yeah, starting at 7 weeks up until more recently, where I feel like now kids would need more engagement in a different way. Yeah.
Yeah. So, if there is one thing that people can take from this conversation, what do you hope that they take?
That I hope that you know that however you are grieving is normal and valid and appropriate. It's human, and there's no roadmap for how it should look. There's no actual time frame of how it should look. So just the more you can trust yourself to feel everything that's here that needs to be felt, and continue to build trust in yourself to ask for support as you need it in different ways. And then just trust in your own process. It's going to be totally different than anyone else's process. And so I guess that's a lot of trusting in ourselves, trusting in yourself.
Yes, yes, that's beautiful. Thank you. I think we all need to be spending more time looking inward. And that is hard to do in a world that demands so much from our attention.
Definitely. Absolutely. It's a lot. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm so glad to be having this conversation and to just, yeah, make a little bit more space for grief and everything else associated with grief in our world, and just to hopefully really continue to grow our world's our world's grief literacy so that we can show up better for each other and for ourselves. And that as we do that, it like builds the foundation for deep relationship and community resilience. I really, really believe that.
And true healing.
Yeah.
You know? How do you imagine that our culture might change if everyone was more grief literate?
Yeah. When I imagine us grieving together and like making space to understand and be with grief and knowing grief as love and longing as well, I just feel like there's so much more bonding and belonging. There's so much of that happens in grief rituals where you feel an embodied experience of our shared humanity, and you get to hear different versions of your story told through completely different people. And you hear someone sharing in a way that feels like the person that you're upset with, or the person that has harmed you so much. And then someone who is here who we're looking at as like, oh, this person's really here doing the work is like bringing all this up for you and your hard feelings towards someone else. So there's so much so much a sense of belonging, so much a sense of shared humanity and empathy, and also like, I'm not alone, because that's the other big thing for everyone listening to remember, of like, you are not alone, and you also were never supposed to do this alone, grieve alone, like at all. And so remembering how to resource ourselves socially and to show up for each other socially so that we can all have greater experiences of connection and community that is so core to our health and wellness individually and collectively.
Yeah. Ugh. What a world that would be.
What a world. I believe I believe in it.
Wow. Alyssa, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, and thank you so much for holding space for me when I cried.
Of course. Oh my gosh, it so makes sense. Those tears make a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I can't wait to connect with you again in the future. I know we will continue to cross paths forever.
Yes, I'm eager for it as well, and to share more ritual space with you. And thank you for the work you're doing.
Oh, of course, of course. It is my mission to change the way that people are educated about this stuff. And if you're listening and you got anything out of this episode, send it to a friend. Send it to someone who just became a parent and is figuring out what this new identity is for them. I know that if we can support each other in grief in a better way, the world will be a better place.
Alyssa, how can people work with you?
My website is a really good place to find more information, which is alyssarosehealingarts.com. But I also most commonly post on Instagram under Alyssa Rose Healing. So that's going to be the most up-to-date spot of upcoming events and gatherings.
Great. How often do you hold grief rituals and gatherings?
Yeah, right now we're hosting, and I'm saying we because I have two co-facilitators, a monthly in-person wailing ceremony, which is a 3-hour space that is really guided by the drum and protects a lot of space for the ritual itself. So that's been a really beautiful monthly offering. And then there are 3 to 4 weekend retreats, grief retreats coming up this year in 2026 as well.
Wow, amazing. Well, I can't wait for people to take advantage of that. And I think also, if something that is called a wailing ceremony seems intimidating to someone, what would you tell them?
That grieving looks and sounds so different for all of us. It took me years of going to grief ritual before I could make a sound at one. And so although it says wailing ceremony, it's called that, silence and quiet and song and any expression is really welcome in that space.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Alyssa.
Yeah, thank you so much, Emily. We'll talk soon.
You're welcome. Okay, sounds good.
Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week. Audio and music production by the amazing Peter Gary, with Lillian Ewert managing all scheduling and operations of Be Well Baby, including this podcast. Thank you both for making this happen. New episodes drop every Wednesday, and I'd love for you to follow us on Instagram at BeWellBabyPDX or visit BeWellBaby.org to book a time to chat with us. And if this episode helped you, please send it to someone who's pregnant, postpartum, or someone in your life who wants to support you better. No one should have to do this alone. Welcome to Be Well Baby. You're in the right place.